Welcome to the Global Justice Report, an online production of the Center for Global Justice. I'm Cliff Durand, your host for today's program. The Center for Global Justice, El Centro para la Justicia Global, is a multinational and bilingual research center located in San Miguel de Allende, Mexico. The center is devoted to research and learning for a better world and empowering a solidarity economy. Due to the pandemic, we have had to discontinue our in-person events and instituted these webinars instead. Without our previous revenue-generating programs, we now depend on your donations to support these webinars and to be able to continue to pay our Mexican staff. You can donate at our website, www.globaljusticecenter.org. Today's program is the 100th webinar that we have done since the start of the pandemic. We began on June 1 of 2019 and have been doing webinars nearly every week since then. So we're very happy to have with us today some special guests who will be talking about immigration issues. They are Rebecca Eichler, who for over 20 years has been practicing immigration law and disaster legal aid. She will be joined by Careen Shannon, also an attorney, writer, and former law professor who's focused on U.S. immigration law and policy for nearly 30 years. We hope to be joined also by Victoria Bruce, a documentary filmmaker. The three of them are preparing a film titled Las Abogadas, attorneys on the front lines of the migrant crisis. I understand the film is to be released this fall. So let me turn the floor over to our guests, Rebecca and Careen.
Thank you very much, Cliff, and thank you all for being here. Vicki seems to be having some technical difficulties, so hopefully she'll be joining us shortly. But Rebecca and I will start off telling you our story. I'm going to share my screen now, and I hope you can all see the slide. Can you see it? Okay. So we've all been engaged, Vicki, Rebecca and I, in migration issues in different ways for many years. And usually the news is so dire, and there's good reason for that. But we wanted to share a bit of a hopeful story that we had the honor to be a part of. And it came about in part through the making of the movie Las Abogadas. So we're going to talk about how it takes a village for a migrant family to find their way to safety. And this story doesn't even tell the entire story of their journey from their home country to Mexico, or from where they are now in the United States to when they will apply for asylum, but it tells an important part of their journey. And we wanted to share the story with you. First, a little bit of background. As you probably all know, there are, under the Trump administration in particular, although it really hasn't stopped under Biden, there were a number of really draconian immigration policies enacted. There was no change to the actual law. Congress never changed any statutes, but the administration has a lot of discretion within its administrative agencies to change policy. So I just wanted to review quickly these three interlocking federal policies that have been at play throughout the pandemic and have affected this family in particular that we're going to talk about. So the Migrant Protection Protocols, or MPP, more colloquially known as Remain in Mexico program, or even more colloquially among immigration attorneys, sometimes known as the Migrant Persecution Protocols, because it's just a deliberately cruel program. This was implemented by the Trump administration in January 2019. So one of the first things he did, along with enacting the Muslim ban, was to enact this MPP program. And what it did, and still does, is force any asylum seekers who are coming to the US-Mexico border to remain in Mexico throughout the duration of any immigration proceedings that they will have in court in the United States. So they might have to cross over to appear for the initial calendaring hearing and then go back to Mexico and wait weeks, months, maybe years until they actually have an asylum hearing before an immigration judge. The Biden administration did try to lift this program to end it, but there was a lawsuit, and the court system all the way up to the Supreme Court said, you can't do it, at least not the way that you are trying to do it. It's not conforming with regular administrative procedure. So it's still in place and it's still operational at those 4 border crossings that you can see there on the slide. Then in 2020, at the beginning of the pandemic, or the beginning of when it hit in North America, the Trump administration invoked an obscure provision of the public health law, which essentially allows the government to prevent people from entering or expel people who have crossed the border using COVID as the excuse. And I say excuse because I think we all know that COVID was already here and it didn't come from Mexico, right? It came with travelers from Asia and Europe. So it's part of a long history in the United States of demonizing immigrants as invaders and as holders of pestilence invading our country. This also is still in place. The Biden administration also tried to end this program. It was supposed to end today, but once again, we had about half the states in the country file a lawsuit against the administration to keep that from happening. And on Friday, a U.S. District Court judge issued a preliminary injunction preventing the administration from lifting Title 42 until, again, they go through a number of administrative procedures, which could take weeks or months or years. And then finally, there's something called humanitarian parole, which has been part of U.S. immigration law for a long time. It allows people who don't have a proper visa or green card to be allowed into the country for urgent humanitarian reasons. And Title 42 itself has its own humanitarian exemption. So some people have been able to get into the United States from Mexico, even though the border is essentially closed because of that exemption. So with this background, I'm going to hand it over to Rebecca to start to tell the story of this migrant family. And first by talking about, slide's not advancing for some reason, talking about the Abba House, there we go, shelter in Celaya, which a number of you probably already know about.
Is this where we show the video, Careen?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Just talk about Abba and the pastor first.
Sure. So as many of you know, especially if you're in San Miguel, Albergue Abba, also known as Abba House, is a migrant shelter located in the city of Celaya, about an hour from San Miguel. And it's been operational for about 6 years. It was founded by Pastor Ignacio, who is pretty much a saint of a human being. Him and his family started the shelter by feeding migrants as they come through on the train tracks. One important note is that Celaya is located at the crossroads of the train tracks, the cargo train. There is no passenger train in Mexico. The cargo train goes right through central Mexico, and it's a crossroads where I should mention that migrants ride on top of this train as a free means of transportation to get to the border and to get across Mexico. And in Celaya, the tracks cross and migrants decide whether they are going to go towards the west to California or towards the east towards Texas. Albergue Abba serves thousands of people, and during the pandemic was one of 3 shelters that was allowed to remain open and operational and housing people overnight. Today, it continues to house people. There are 3 types of residents at Abba: migrants in transit who basically stay one night, they get a hot meal, a shower, and a safe place to sleep. The other migrants who are living there are refugees, people who are applying for asylum in Mexico. And the third type of migrant third type of resident who is staying at ABA are long-term residents who are recuperating from amputations that they have suffered when they are traveling on these trains and fall off. We should note that ABA is the only shelter in all of Mexico that is geared specifically to providing rehabilitation and services for amputees. And Pastor Ignacio has huge dreams. During the pandemic, he was able to, with the help of the Latin American Relief Fund, of which Careen and I are board members, and I've put the link in the chat, with the help of the Latin American Relief Fund, was able to raise the money to buy the building that houses Albergue ABA, and he is moving on to bigger dreams and wants to create a center for human rights to house amputees long-term, house vulnerable people long-term, LGBTQ people, single mothers, and amputees in a larger area. It's a beautiful, beautiful space. It has a swimming pool and grounds, and it's really nice. And we will be looking for support to make that a reality next. So this family has been living well, I guess now we show the clip, Careen?
Yeah, you can show the clip
Okay.
now. So I will stop sharing and then you can-
Okay. So my turn, yes. And here we go.
So this is when Rebecca first meets the family in the shelter.
Okay, oh, can you see that?
In Mexico, there is a train line. Migrants have historically ridden on top of the trains. It's called La Bestia, the beast. It's a really long cargo train, and it's a free way to get to the border. In an instant, people can fall from the train and suffer an amputation.
Hola, Rebeca. Mucho gusto. Giselle. ¿Cuántos años tiene Giselle? 20. ¿Pasó en el tren? ¿Se cayó del tren?
Sí, en busca de mí. Yo estaba en Saltillo trabajando y cuando ella se vino y todo.
Sí. ¿Duele mucho?
Right, sorry.
¿Tuvo tu accidente?
El 18 de noviembre.
De noviembre.
Ella me da bastante fuerza a mí porque yo casi no tenía fuerzas, me desmayaba mucho y ella me hacía videollamadas todavía partida.
Eres bien fuerte y bien valiente.
It's the hardest when I put myself in their place. I have an 18-year-old girl. I have to kind of not let my brain go there, because then I would just sit there crying with the people, and that's not helpful to anybody.
So tell us how you came to be in the shelter and meet this family.
So as part of the, just kind of general, I consult with the migrant shelter with ABA when there are particularly complicated cases or cases that touch on somehow getting to the US. And I was there actually speaking with another resident who was hoping to cross into the United States. And we were there with Vicky filming for the documentary, and Pastor Ignacio said that, Sophia and Giselle wanted to speak with me. So we came in and I just was chatting with them. And one surprising thing that they said that they hadn't, with as many foreigners as passed through the shelter, nobody ever really speaks to them. They just kind of, I guess it's, sort of a disaster tourism type of thing. And they look around, but they don't connect with the residents of the shelter. So I just chatted with them and met them. And
so at least on my screen, sorry, Rebecca, if this happened for some other people, the titles were covered up for a moment. So in case you didn't follow it, this is a mother and daughter. The mother said she was already in Mexico working, and the daughter decided to come join her. And the way she did that, of course, was with money to pay for transportation. She rode on the famous train on La Bestia, and she fell from the train and lost her legs in a tragic accident.
and she lost both her legs. They were amputated, as you could see, almost at the hip. So she has a very little remaining of her legs. And so they've been living in the shelter for a year. Her rehabilitation is complete. The International Red Cross, the UNHCR, UN Human Rights Commission,
High Commissioner for Human Rights.
High Commissioner for Refugees.
Refugees, right?
They've been supporting their rehabilitation, and the time of her support, it's not, they weren't getting kicked out, but her rehabilitation was finished, and the family decided that they wanted to continue on to the United States, to continue the journey that they had initially set out to undertake. So they got in touch with Vicky and with us about moving forward. And so that's where we came into the picture, creating.
As you can see, Rebecca took on a lot. She coordinated everything to get them from the shelter to the border.
Yes, so that did involve a lot. It's the mom and the daughter, and then there was also a brother who has been living in Saltillo. So he needed to come to Celaya so that all three of them could travel to the border together. So we bought bus tickets, we booked internal flights from Mexico for the family members, we arranged transportation from the airport. We had a really great plan in place that had a whole bunch of moving parts. Part of that was, not only the logistics of getting them to the border, but once they got to the border, they were going, Charlene DeCruz is an attorney who's been working at the border since the beginning of the Trump administration. And she's figured out a way to apply for these humanitarian paroles for especially vulnerable people, demonstrating that they are in need of extra protection and that they could not stay safely in Mexico. So Charlene and her assistant, Alex Norman, this is a heroic photo of Alex, and he's a complete volunteer. Charlene had been working for a nonprofit organization, and now she's working on her own, I believe, and she filed the paperwork that was required for them to get into the border or get across the United States, and Alex was helpful with that as well. In addition, as part of the documentation of part of the application for the humanitarian parole, we also needed to submit a psychological evaluation, which was completed by Abril, who is Pastor Ignacio's daughter and a psychologist who works at Albergue ABA. So she provided a written psychological evaluation showing that the whole family needed to stay together and that they would need, due to the trauma that they'd suffered, that they would need ongoing support in the United States that they could only get in the United States. In addition to a psychological evaluation, they needed a medical evaluation to show, to demonstrate the medical procedures that Giselle had gone through, and Dr. Nano Drobny, who is also a board member of the Latin American Relief Fund and a medical doctor and professor at the University of Michigan, provided a medical evaluation to support her humanitarian parole application.
So already just here you can see how many people it's taken just to get together the paperwork needed to make this application.
Right.
But there's more.
Yeah. And wait, there's more. So that's just the background to get to to get to the border that they could to apply. And I will now share the next video.
Yes, I'll stop here now. This is when Rebecca went to see the family again to prepare them for this trip, and specifically for the legal aspect of it, make sure they had all of their ID ready and all the other documentation.
Okay, let me share my screen.
So this would be clip number 2.
Okay.
So we're headed back to Albergue ABA, to the migrant shelter in Celaya, to speak with one of the residents, the young girl who fell off the train. At the current moment, there's no, the border remains closed to asylum seekers with very small exceptions for especially vulnerable people. We have Charlene at the border working on the legal portion of it. We're also going to do just a very cursory evaluation to make sure that she is qualified, that her case qualifies for asylum. ¿Cuándo llegaste aquí? No me recuerdo.
Ya voy a cumplir un año.
Ay.
Aquí en el albergue ya voy a cumplir un año.
Quiero confirmar que usted van a buscar asilo en los Estados Unidos.
Sí.
Los requisitos es que usted ha sufrido o tiene un temor de sufrir algún daño o amenaza en su país por un grupo que puede ser el gobierno o un grupo que el gobierno no puede controlar. En su ejemplo, en su caso, probablemente vas a ser las maras, sí. No es fácil ganar asilo, que usted debe que buscar una abogada que pueda ayudarle de este proceso de asilo. ¿Qué formas de documentos de identificación tienen ahora? ¿Tienen su
Residencia.
¿Tienen un pasaporte hondureño?
No. Yo perdí todo cuando tuve mi accidente. Pues perdí todo. No, cuando llegó la ambulancia, pues no recogieron todas mis cosas. Tengo fotos así de mi accidente. Así.
Ay, gosh.
Llevo 5 operaciones por todo.
5. Pero ojalá que seguimos adelante, ¿no?
Así es. Siempre adelante y pues siempre estoy luchando. Aquí me dan muchas oportunidades como de tocar el piano, de leer partituras, así, de hacer cualquier cosa, de tejer, de hacer canto. Aquí lo apoyan mucho, eso es la verdad.
It's always tough to say. What you don't see in that clip is how the cameraman we brought with us was so moved that he got up and left the camera running and went and gave the mother a hug. So let me see if I can get this back. Okay, there we are. So, and you don't see Rebecca with her iPhone taking photos of all the documents to send to Charlene, because Charlene needs them for the humanitarian parole application. But here are some maps just showing you, well, the trip that was supposed to happen. They were supposed to go from Celaya to the airport in Lyon, but there was more drama on the day they were leaving the shelter. Why don't you tell us about it, Rebecca?
Right. So we had arranged, there are lots of moving parts, as I said. This family has never traveled on a plane before, and we'd also heard reports that the immigration officials at the border are routinely harassing people who don't seem to be Mexican, any migrants. And so we were concerned that this would happen to them. So we arranged with a friend and local San Miguel resident, Leah Alonso, who had agreed to fly with them to Reynosa to make sure that they got, through immigration out of the airport onto to their next, the person who was next going to pick them up, and she was going to fly back to Mexico City or to San Miguel and then carry on. So on the morning that we were transporting them, we left San Miguel about 5 o'clock in the morning because they had a 9 o'clock flight. And as everybody knows, you're supposed to be at the airport super early. And my family has lots of experience driving through Mexico and Central America. And our number one rule has always been to never, ever drive at dark. And this isn't necessarily in this area for cartel reasons or crime reasons, but as many of you will know, the road from San Miguel to the León airport has no shoulders. It is pitch black dark. There's no lighting. There's no cell phone service for most of the ride, and it's very rural and windy. And so, livestock and people can wander into the roads. So I find myself in the car with Leah on our way to the airport at 5 o'clock in the morning, breaking all of the rules that we had set for never driving at night. And I was regretting being on the road then, but knowing that this was an important thing to do.
The family wasn't with you though, right?
No, the family wasn't with us. We had arranged for a driver to pick them up from Celaya and bring them to the Leon airport. So we were all going to meet at BJX at about, I think we were supposed to meet there at 7:30 for their 9 o'clock flight or 9:30 flight. And as we're driving along, when we get to one of the little towns where there is cell phone service, my phone just blows up. I'm getting texts from Abril at the shelter. I'm getting texts from the family. I'm getting texts from the driver that we had hired to bring them. And what had happened was in their very last minutes at Abba, the mother was holding a glass and tripped and fell and cut herself. And we heard that she was going to need surgery, that, there was going to all sorts of things. But the bottom line is they were not going to make their scheduled flight to out of BGX to Mexico City, continuing on to Reynosa. So Leah and I pull over to the side of the road and start engaging in, furious travel planning using our phones. Thank God Leah speaks incredibly, Leah is Mexican, and we're trying to figure out how to get, what the next flight is, what the cheapest flight is. This is all, there's no funding behind this. This is just individuals who are helping support the expenses involved in this. And so we managed to get a later flight out of Mexico City, and Leah, angel that she is, volunteers to drive the family from San Miguel to Mexico City and make sure that and make sure they get on the plane. Our original plan was for her, like I said, to fly up to Reynosa with the family, but with catching a later flight, she was not going to get in time to catch her return flight from Reynosa. And because Reynosa and many of these border towns are so incredibly dangerous, we did not want her to leave the airport and have to find a hotel. So part of the new plan was Leah was going to drive them to Mexico City, put them on the plane, and hope for the best. And that's what she did. And it was incredibly comical because Leah's car is not that big. We have a family with with a year's worth of luggage and 2 prostheses, 2 legs that are sticking out, and we're trying to get all of the stuff in the trunk of the car, and in the end, the legs are sticking out of the trunk, and she's trying to push down the trunk to close it, and then the legs are sticking out. So the driver, who, the mother ended up needing 20 stitches in her arm. She didn't need a huge surgery. And so the driver brings them back to San Miguel. We turn around on our way to the airport. We go back to San Miguel and meet at Leah's house. And she gets in the car. She puts them in the car with their luggage and she drives off to Mexico City. And Leah she's an entertainer and is Mexican. And so she really connected with the family, entertaining them with songs and just great stories. And they actually had a really pleasant, enjoyable 4 hours to Mexico City, and Leah got them to the airport. And then again, with these legs, these prostheses, we would just figure that we would just check them in, but you can't, of course, just check in two legs. And she didn't have a bag, and, quick thinking that she wraps them, they have those plastic wrapping things for the luggage. And Leah sent me a video of the legs spinning around on the little machine, getting wrapped in plastic. And, all of the baggage that we had prepaid, none of that transferred. So all of these things, expenses were adding up, time was adding up, but Leah got them on the plane and they flew up to Reynosa, where they were met by a Pastor Hector, who runs a shelter up there. He runs the Senda de Vida shelter in Reynosa. And that was another really interesting point, because I realized that I hadn't told them, I hadn't personally impressed upon them how dangerous Reynosa was. Reynosa is so dangerous that the cartels basically control the place. That if a migrant catches a taxi in Reynosa, the taxi drivers are in collaboration with the cartels, and they will kidnap people and hold them for ransom. So I've heard many stories of people who fortunately had their GPS going when they were in a taxi, and when they realized that the taxi driver was not taking them to their destination, immediately stopped and got out. So this Pastor Hector has special permission from the cartels to drive on the highways unmolested between Reynosa to the airport. So he was a perfect person to pick them up at the airport and then take them to his shelter. So the family arrived in Reynosa and they text me and they say, we've arrived, we're outside of the airport, the pastor's not here. So yet another bump in the already bumpy road that we'd taken to get to this point. And I told them, make whatever you do, do not get into any other car until you have until you're certain that it's the pastor. And luckily it was just an issue of traffic on the way. And so the pastor was able to pick them up and he brought them to the shelter and he housed them for 3 days until they were ready to present themselves to the U.S. immigration authorities, which is the process that Charlene had already started. The next point, of course, is anybody coming into the United States. Although interestingly, it's, COVID tests are required for people traveling to the U.S. by air, but land borders don't have this requirement except for migrants coming across. So just another obstacle that they're throwing in the way to make it harder for people to cross the border. Global Response Management is a nonprofit that was started. I'm not quite sure when they were started, but they were started several years ago. And they have been providing, I met them first. They opened a medical clinic at the migrant shelter at the refugee camp that was established in Matamoros. And a few years, or last year, I think the government disbanded that migrant shelter in Matamoros, and Global Response Management, GRM, now operates a clinic in Reynosa. So they offer free COVID testing. So they're just another step, another group, another nonprofit that helped this family move on because they wouldn't be able to otherwise afford the required COVID testing that they need in order to get into the US. So once they were cleared, once their humanitarian parole application was approved, once their COVID tests came back negative, they crossed the bridge into the United States and then were met on the other side by a woman named Gabi Zavala, who is...
Vicky has joined us, so I think she can take over now because as Rebecca coordinated everything on the Mexican side, Vicky took over as soon as they crossed the border. So welcome, Vicky, and tell us how you did this all.
Thank you, everyone. My apologies. I had a minor emergency this morning, but everything's fine. This is a beautiful story. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Careen. And thank you for having us today to discuss what turned out to be a really happy ending story. I'm a filmmaker. I'm a documentary filmmaker. And if you ask me how to keep your distance from your subjects, I'm the wrong person to ask. So in every film I've made, you become very, very connected to the people that you're covering. You have a lot of respect for them for giving you their time, and you end up in some kind of collaborative helping way. And the day that we met, this is a picture of me in Matamoros actually giving a lesson to these kids in English because their teacher didn't show up. And I said, well, they were so excited for school one day. So you just kind of, you're there and you get, I'm grateful because I have these opportunities to do things. And the day Rebecca met Giselle and Sophia in the ABBA shelter, which you've already heard about, I had no idea that she was even talking to them. And I didn't, because as the director of the film, I let my camera people go in, and Pastor Ignacio had asked them to go in to talk to this family. I had no idea who they are. My Spanish isn't great, and I'm standing outside and I'm just waiting because it's a very small space. Rebecca came out, my two camera people came out, Pastor Ignacio came out, and I went in because we get people to sign releases that they agree to appear on camera. And I walked around the corner and I was just stunned because when you see Giselle, and I also have a daughter, 18 years old, someone so young who has been amputated, her legs are gone very high up. And she's just with this beautiful smile and a lot of sadness too. And I talked to them for a little bit, and it just never left me, the feeling that I know I want to help these people. I have this image of this girl graduating from the university in the United States. I don't know where, I believe that image is going to come true. I just don't know how to get from A to Z. So yeah, so the first, well, good people doing good. I'd been, reaching out to Rebecca. Rebecca, is it time? Do you think Charlene could help? Knowing that these are the true miracle workers, the lawyers, right? And all the nonprofits. Do you think it's time? And, I'm throwing it out there, and it'd been 6 months, and I've got a lot of stuff going on in the meantime. And all of a sudden, Rebecca calls me and says, Charlene's ready to move this family. And I was like, awesome. I have no idea what to do with them when they get here. And having taken on sort of the role of the instigator of making sure they get across, I really felt responsible to get them a place to live, knowing also that they don't have family. So Gabby is a colleague of Charlene and was super helpful of bringing her across and getting them shelter as soon as they crossed. But I had no housing for them. I mean, how do you find housing like this for a girl who's with a disability? You need an accessible place to live. They don't have food, they don't have money, they don't have family. And I reached out to, we had it on the screen before, Good People Doing Good is some random Facebook group that someone started and somebody put me on. And I had found someone to help another migrant earlier. And I threw it out there and I was like, hey, got a question. Anybody have housing for this family? And somebody told me, reach out to the Asylum Women Enterprise in Baltimore. And I live in Annapolis. And I'm like, I'm not feeling super positive that this is going to work out, but I have nothing else, right? So I reached out to the Asylum Women and they said, and I'm going to hold on Andrea for a minute because I'm going to, before, I started coordinating everything else, the Asylum Women Enterprise, Laura Brown, director, said, oh yeah, we actually have a house. We have some asylum women moving out because they got their work permits, they got jobs. And we're going to have a downstairs bedroom and we'll build a ramp and make it accessible. And they can come in the next 2 weeks. I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So I just went into like overdrive, and Rebecca knows, like when I get an idea, it doesn't occur to me, not everyone wants to do it with me. So I'm like dragging everyone I can in. And one of them was Team Brownsville. I've never met in person anyone from Team Brownsville. I'm sure I've seen them in the camp while I was filming, but I've heard of them and I knew the work that they were doing was phenomenal. And they were the people to contact to help this family when they cross. Team Brownsville would feed 5,000 people a day, 3 meals a day. I'm sure many of you have heard of them. Incredible. And I knew that there was an organization called Miles for Migrants that actually takes migrants when they come over the border. They have no money, right? Usually they have somewhere to go, but they have, it's thousands of dollars, to fly across country, to take a bus, even hundreds and hundreds of dollars. Miles for Migrants is an organization where people can donate their frequent flyer miles that they don't use. And this organization partners with other nonprofits because, the migrants are screened. These are real people. Here are their papers. They've come through legally across for asylum. And so Team Brownsville reached out to Miles for Migrants, and I got tickets for Sophia, Giselle, and Sophia's son, and Giselle's brother, Gerardo, to fly to Baltimore. So that is really, really amazing. And it's just something somebody can do with their frequent flyer miles. And we're talking about like everybody can play a part. It's just something that, is super helpful that people don't think about. So here I am waiting at the airport. This is, I can't tell you how many texts, like Sophia would text me every day. And that's another thing I'd like to say is the people that come to the United States are not fearful, right? They are go-getters. They are going to save their lives and their families. And she just kept on me. She was sure that I was never going to forget that family. And I didn't. And so I think we lost our.
So Rebecca's going to play the next clip now.
Oh, okay, cool.
Greeting them at the airport.
All right.
Actually, not this one. So the next one.
This one? Oh, sorry. Wrong clip. 4. There it is. Get ready to cry.
Because I find it Spanish people when the language. I know. Okay. Thank you, God. Oh my God. Okay, bienvenidos.
So that was pretty awesome. They were so cute. They said, you know, in Texas, no one spoke Spanish, and they were walking around, and a lot of times the nonprofits will give them a piece of paper that says, "Help me, I don't speak English." And Gerardo says, "No one in Texas spoke English," and they have masks on. You know, I said, I find that a little hard to believe, or spoke Spanish. So yeah, that was really amazing. So then they came to Baltimore, their new home in Maryland. We're really happy to have them in Maryland because some of you may know different states have different catalogs, different asylum judges, and different percentages of passing asylum cases. And Maryland is one of the higher places that pass more asylum cases. So it's good that they're here. It's good that they will apply for asylum here. And these are 3 of the women that they work with. Laura Brown. Laura Brown is the executive director now, newly, but she's been working with them for a while. And her mother passed away and actually donated her entire house to the organization. And that's where the women are living now. Donna is part-time, and she is just phenomenal. She takes care of everything. I mean, she's like, do you need food? Do you need clothes? Do you need, you know, she's got them at Hannah too, who I haven't met too much, but she works with them. They're getting English ESL. They're getting lessons in how to do industrial sewing, and afterwards will be offered a job doing so. So Rebecca, hi. Rebecca, I know, it makes me cry too. So it's just really, really incredible. At the same time, they reached out because Gerardo was sort of like an add-on that I hadn't been thinking was coming too, but super helpful to have their brother come because he can actually carry Giselle from place to place. He's, you know, strong enough. And then, so I reached out to, you know, this is a family affair for the film, Laura Seltzer-Dunai, who is the producer of my film. And she's also very, very committed to helping with the migrant crisis. And she decided to take Gerardo into her home temporarily while the asylum enterprise, the Women Asylee Enterprise, found him this humongous house. He only has 1 room. However, it's about 1,000 square feet, the 1 room he has in this old, you know, sort of Munsters, cool house in Baltimore that is run by the Mennonite Church. And it's a house where they just, they live communally. Just a bunch of nice people. Some are medical students from other countries. Some are sort of missionaries. Some are, and they have about 4 asylees in there that they let stay there. And so everybody's here, everybody's safe, everybody's moving forward in their life.
So Rebecca, we have a couple of clips to show how happy Giselle is now with her new scooter. The first one, she was just trying one out in the supermarket. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right, Home Depot.
Let me, hold on. Let's see.
Beep, beep. Why won't they open the door? Excuse us.
And then the other one.
So that was the first time she'd ever had the independence that that Scooter had. She's only had a wheelchair, and there wasn't really any place to go in the shelter where she was outside of the shelter. So this is like, we have another friend who donated the scooter.
Very empowering.
And then finally, I don't think we have a photo of it today, but the Giselle and Gerardo made deep fried Honduran tacos for Mother's Day for their mom at my house, and they're delicious. And that was just the super best Mother's Day. So it's been, yeah, actually, there they are at my house. And there they are on the left, lower left, with bags and bags of clothes people brought them. Gerardo attending a concert in Maryland with Laura and her husband within like 2 weeks of being here. Completely comfortable. The kid is like, no fear. Here's a little Cameroonian baby that Giselle's holding. Those are the roommates in Baltimore. And up in the top is a picture of another nonprofit that is related to a deer that lived in a house named Dilly. There's a book about Dilly. Dilly passed away, and the Dilly organization raised money and gave them each several $100 gift cards. And so, yeah, it's just, it takes a village. And I think that's so obvious when we tell this story.
Most people don't have a village. Most migrants have nobody and nothing. They might have family that they have plans to reunite with in the United States, but they have to get there. They have to navigate the danger. They have to figure out how to pay for it. This was one lucky family. And I should point out the picture in the middle, the young man on the left, somebody Vicky met in the course of making this film, who she adopted, a Cameroonian refugee. So when Vicky goes all in, she goes all in.
He's actually the editor of the film too. He's a cameraman and an editor of the film. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
So when we do these kinds of presentations, people often ask how they can help. And there are lots of ways you can help with your time, your expertise, your money, your frequent flyer miles. So these are some organizations that were involved in this one refugee family story. And I hope you'll consider supporting some of them. And thank you, everyone. I think we have a few minutes for questions if anybody has any question they want to ask. You can see the difference from that first meeting with Rebecca and Giselle, right? And where they are today. I can just see the joy emanating out of their faces, the smiles. You can see how much more relaxed they feel. And with Giselle being more mobile now with the scooter, that's just night and day.
I think it's also important to mention that it wasn't an easy decision for them to leave the shelter. You know, they have been living there for a year. As Giselle pointed out in the video, she gets a lot of support. ABBA provides a whole lot of support, and to leave the comforts of the known to the unknown is really very scary. So that was, you know, it wasn't just okay, I want to go. There was a lot of soul searching and a lot of strategizing as to whether this would be the right thing for them. And obviously, ultimately, it's the family's decision what they want to do. And we were all just there to support the decision as best as we could.
And I think what Careen said earlier, I see it all the time. I see, when I'm looking at the film, I see these haggard moms, and, you know, they're in their 30s. And, you know, once they're out of that situation, it's like a whole different person emerges, you know, and we'd all be like that, you know. But I think when people look at them like the other, because we see the other, oh, it's this haggard person, I'm not like that, you know. But as soon as they have even the slightest opportunity that you have, they're out, their hair's done, they're getting their nails done, they're in a scooter or a car, they're driving, you know, we're all the same. And it's really impressive to see, like what Careen said, just, I mean, we're talking a week difference, right? So it's really, everybody blossoms with opportunity.
Of course, they still have a tough road ahead. They have to find a lawyer, which I think the Asyli Women Enterprise is going to help them with. The lawyer has a year from the date they entered to gather all the documentation evidence of the persecution that they suffered in their home country and put it together into an asylum application. And that, that's a big job. And asylum is not easy to win in the United States these days, although as Vicki said, they're one of the better jurisdictions. So that gives us some hope.
Can we ask questions?
Yes, please.
Oh, good. First of all, thank you so much. It's just amazing. Oh my gosh. Where now? How long ago did they actually arrive in Baltimore? And what are they doing now? I mean, is she able to go to school or anything like that, or not yet?
So they arrived in Baltimore. It's been about 5 weeks, 6 weeks ago, I believe.
Very recent.
Yeah, very recently. So school's a hard one. School is hard because they don't have yet a social security number. And that's not true. School will let them in. Even in Maryland, anyone, even undocumented, can go to our community colleges. However, you pay as if you're an out-of-state tuition.
That's just so expensive.
$1,200, $1,300 for one class, where regularly it's $300 a class. So it's prohibitive. The other thing is they can't work until they get a work permit. At least, they can do some work, babysitting or under the table, whatever, but like a real work permit takes at least 6 months after they've applied for asylum, at least.
Yeah.
And in some cases, because of other complications, it could be much longer. So right now they're learning English. They're going to church. Gerardo worked for a friend of mine a little bit. It's a little bit far for me to visit all the time, but we go up once a week. We take them out.
Okay.
We bring them home with us. Like I said, they spent Mother's Day weekend here. But they're very, they're independent. They're happy. I just feel like they don't talk to me every day anymore.
That's kind of sad.
I know, but and now it's things like, Vicki, there's wasps on the front porch. What do we do? Instead of like, save my life and get me out of this country. So I'm a little bit, down-regulated, but it's great. It's great. So now, there's more people to help, who are the next people.
Oh gosh, that's just amazing. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing all that. Wow.
Thank you.
So impressed.
And again, I can't emphasize enough that
on YouTube would like to raise a question. You can do that by sending an email to me at globaljusticecliff@gmail.com. That's global.justice.cliff@gmail.com. And for those who are with us in the Zoom room, of course, you can raise your questions directly by waving at us, and I'll call on you.
I was just going to say, I can't emphasize enough that most families don't have this kind of support. They were lucky to meet Vicki and Rebecca and to land in that wonderful shelter in Celaya and find lots of people along the way that were willing to help in different ways.
That's so true. That's so true.
So in the chat, I put in the links to all of the organizations that Careen put on her on the slide, and we'll also add it to the comments in the YouTube on the YouTube page once it's up. So that these are all organizations that we've worked with. I know that it's overwhelming. How do you help? What do you do? Where do you start? And these are just some places to start. And I think it is a very overwhelming situation. And I like to tell the story that my best friend told me when I get overwhelmed with this about, there's a parable of a person walking along the beach there's somebody sitting on the beach watching somebody walk along the beach, and every so often they bend down, they pick something up and they throw something in the water. And as the person, gets closer, they realize that they're bending down and they're picking up starfish, and the observer is like, what are you doing? And the the pedestrian, the walker says, look at this beach, it's full of starfish. And the observer says, well, what are you doing? He's like, well, I'm saving them. He says, you can't possibly make a difference. There's so many people there. There's so many starfish. You can't possibly make a difference. And the person bends down, picks up one starfish, throws it in the water, and he says, I'm making a difference to this one. And I think that that's what we all need to remember, is that we can make a huge difference in the lives of one person. And I get very emotional with this. So you can help one starfish.
Oh, great. Yeah. Let's say if you have limited resources and you can't donate to all of the organizations, are there any particular ones you think are maybe the most needy right now, or?
Well, I'm going to do a little self-promotion here. I'm the board, Careen and I are both on the board of the Latin American Relief Fund, which is the migrant shelter that this whole story started at. And it's in Mexico, so your impact is huge. We pay teachers there, and $100 goes so far into helping. There's larger organizations that obviously do really, really good work as well. But smaller organizations such as the Latin American Relief Fund, your impact will be profound there. And as I said, we're trying to purchase an extra land to expand the vision that the pastor has. And, your contribution will be immensely impactful there.
Okay. All right. That's good to know. Can I just say one other quick thing to you, Rebecca? I'm actually a neighbor of yours in San Miguel. I recently found you. I live at Puente Viejo, right next door to Nano. And I found out about your recycling project, and I was excited because it's close, So thanks for that. That's really nice. I've been taking plastic things there.
Great, thank you, Anne.
Yeah. Okay. Wow.
Speaking of money, I'm curious how you support yourselves. Lawyers usually make pretty good money, but I don't imagine that you make much from your work with migrants.
I do. Everything is volunteer. All of the work that I've been doing since I moved to Mexico 4 years ago is volunteer.
That's amazing. That's great.
But if you read her husband's book, which I will plug, her husband wrote a book about the way that these two have been pinching pennies their whole young lives, while all of us in our 20s were spending, and have done a wonderful job of retiring young and living their best lives. So the name of the book is How We Ruined Our Lives.
The year we ruined our lives.
The year we ruined our lives. Well, I got to look for that.
It's hysterical. It is so good, and a good sort of Bible if you want to run off and
do something like this. Wow, that's great.
Super cool.
It's available on Amazon.
All right.
And we actually have copies here in San Miguel, Anne, so come on over and you can pick up a copy.
That's good.
Signed.
Oh, that's great. Well, I'm going to write down both of those things and just grabbing for something here. And that's wonderful.
Gosh. I think I see
there was a question in the chat. Yeah. The question is, what's something specific we can do to help with the work that we're doing? Will all these links be on the film site? Again, all of the links that are in the chat right now will be on the YouTube page. You can we have a Facebook page for the film, Las Abogadas Film, or is it Las Abogadas Documentary? Which is
LasAbogadasFilm.org.
LasAbogadasFilm.com is our website. And we will put some of these links on our website, but we'll also more quickly put them on our Facebook page. So like us to follow, and we just submitted the film to our first film festival. Congratulations, Vicki, on Friday. It's a huge accomplishment. This is a tiny, tiny budget film. Shockingly, it's a huge amount of money, but it's a small budget for a film. And we're hoping we're going to have it in film festivals in the fall, and hopefully we'll have it at the Guanajuato Film Festival next summer. So we'll be able to screen it locally here.
Oh, that would be wonderful. Gosh. Okay, so the book again is The Year We Ruined Our Lives.
Yes, The Year We Ruined Our Lives. I'll see if I
Great
can,
title.
well, it looks, yeah, please look it up. The Year We Ruined Our Lives. He's a funny writer.
Very good.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Well,
God,
thank you,
wonderful.
everybody, so much for being here, and
Oh,
thank
yeah.
you, Anne, for all your great questions.
Okay.
Been
Thank you,
delightful
Cliff, for
talking to
having
you all.
us.
Yeah. Thank you, Cliff, too, for putting everything together. It was really amazing. Okay. Well, okay, everybody, have a good day.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Thank you, Cliff. Thank you, Center for Global Justice.
Well, if there's
Thank
no
you.
more questions, I guess we will sign off with thanks to our presenters. We hope our audience, both present here and on YouTube, enjoyed it as much as I did. Today's webinar, as well as past programs, are available on YouTube, accessible from our website, www.globaljusticecenter.org. And I hope you will join us again next week for our webinar on the solidarity economy in Soviet and post-Soviet Russia. Our speaker will be Alexandra Bustalin, who's a Russian leftist and advocate of cooperatives. So that will be next Monday, same time, same place. And finally, I want to thank our webinar team, Liz Mestres, Gregory Diamond, Roberto Robles, Olivia Canales, Robert Stone, Betsy Bowman, and myself. And now, this is Cliff Durand signing off until next Monday.
Thank you, Cliff.
Thank you, Cliff.
Bye-bye.